Great, thanks, Terry. Perfect. So thanks, Terry, and thanks for this opportunity to be with Read On here in, not Massachusetts, Arizona. I have to say, as a person that's worked with a Massachusetts statewide campaign, we've often been thought partners with Terry in trying to, again, emulate a lot of what's happening here in Arizona to really, again, push this incredible movement and this critical issue forward. So today I want to share a little bit about the context of which we're working in, the work that Dr. Noni Lasso and I are doing with partners across the country, and then, of course, how this work aligns with a partnership here in Arizona, all really to take the literacy efforts and our investments to the next level. So I want to begin with this right here, which is the context of which we work in, and one that really will look familiar to many of you in this room, which is that across the country, the states, communities, and school districts are all making increased investments and momentum around programs and supports that all promote early literacy in some way, shape, or form. It's really unprecedented and something we should all feel extremely heartened by and to celebrate, which is, again, why many of us are here today. As you can see here, it ranges from the summer programming to the after-school programming to the family education workshops to the home visiting efforts and to our library programming. And, encouragingly, we can see that these programs and supports often go beyond the educational context. We know it takes a village, as we've heard here today. It goes into our health clinics and our community centers and churches. Yet, what I want to talk about a little bit today is that with all of this coverage and promise and investments in momentum, and when we have a village going forward and to celebrate it, we have to be very cautious of a few potential pitfalls, challenges, and unintended consequences that really require a deeper look and a strategic approach if we're going to continue to take these literacy efforts to the next level. So today, I encourage us to look at these pitfalls, take them on, understand them, and really commit to the strategic approach to really be able to overcome them, exactly how Read On Arizona has done in this past year, and we are appreciative of that partnership. So first, if we look at the first pitfall, this one is where there's often a disconnect between what we expect and what we're invested in. This comes to the idea that oftentimes we expect too much from programs that by design will never reach the intended outcome. Oftentimes we use this notion of what you see here, which is on the one hand, programs might serve by design a raising awareness function. And on the other, it might have the express outcome to actually change behaviors. But what becomes quite clear, and often clear, is that programs and services are guided by the goal to change behaviors, but often by design only serve a raising awareness function. So as we commit to these programs and invest in these programs, we have to clearly look at program feasibility. Second, we focus on the challenge of limited and unclear information on impact. Today, success is often defined by the amount of activities and programs of which we're running and serving, and oftentimes we use the outputs versus the outcomes to measure that impact. So oftentimes we have an unclear distinction on what impact really is within our programs and services. So when we start to measure, we want to get very clear on the outcomes, which are the changing behaviors and measuring the types of behaviors in children's literacy development, versus the outcomes, which is oftentimes just the products of the programs and services. And finally, there's often a need for this more strategic coordination. So if we go back to this collective landscape, we know that strategic coordination goes beyond just coverage and coverage of all settings and all ages, but again, looking at what is occurring within each one of these programs to ensure strategic coordination. Oftentimes we see inefficient redundancies happening across programs. Sometimes we see confusion among stakeholders and providers, and sometimes we have that initiative fatigue happening with both health campaigns or reading campaigns, and we want to be clear on how these fit together, not just for coverage sake, but from an impact and alignment stance. So then what does that mean? If we as funders, as community members, as education leaders, as states are going to do to overcome these common pitfalls and really take our efforts to the next level? It's going to take what Read On Arizona is really committed to and what partners across the state have, which means that we're going to have to take on a more highly impact and coordinated approach that's going to happen at two different levels. One, we're going to have to look at the individual level, which means that we have to gain a clear understanding about how and why our programs, our supports, and our instructional services are going to lead or not lead to the intended outcome. And then we're going to have to look at the collective level, use those individual program analysis results to really understand and identify gaps in programming and services and potentially a lack of coordination across them, whether it be at the state, the community, or the district level. So let's take a look at what this approach might look like in action and what many of us have taken on in Read On Arizona as partners. So if we engage in this impact analysis, we first take a landscape of the programs and services of what is happening within your collective effort. So we revisit and ensure it's all captured, that the many programs and services and the resources invested within the collective effort, all to lay the foundation for the strategic analysis. So then we dig into these 5 dimensions, what the research says are essential for any individual and collective change effort to really, within each of the programs, within the after-school program, within the library programming, asking ourselves, who is the population of which we're serving? How often is it happening? Let's look at the dosage. How are we supporting the staff within these efforts to really ensure that they can engage in the interaction and intervention? What is that delivery mechanism? And finally, how are we evaluating that effort to have some type of indicators of success? So from there, we use this individual program analysis to really get a sense of what it might look like on the collective landscape. So here you can see we categorize a community's programs and supports across the continuum from raising awareness to changing behaviors. And you'll see here that the community's efforts are diverse and serious, but they all fall somewhat short if the goal is to change behaviors. Hence why you see on the right side, it's a little less full than the left side. And you can see the balance is a little more tipped toward that raising awareness type of effort. And this is okay if this is an early stage of the work type of campaign or effort, or if the goal is to simply raise awareness. But oftentimes what we want is to look at this strategic map and get very clear about what our collective goal is so we can start to align our investments accordingly. So given this strategic map, stakeholders across the community or state or district have a couple critical findings at hand and are now better set up to think more strategically about where they want to prioritize their investments, using data to drive those decisions, and really get to better outcomes. This might mean, adding programs, but often it means taking away programs. And it could be tweaking and bolstering what's in play. It could be substituting, or it could be a whole new approach altogether. In this case, we might see some resulting decisions, which means further investments in those programs that are really demonstrating measurable impact and streamlining some of the raising awareness efforts to really only those that are gaining traction. So we can imagine here that with this type of approach and the way that Read On Arizona has really invested, that this is where we've landed, right? To work with this approach and to accelerate the foundation that's happened at the individual and collective level here in Arizona. Over the past 5 years, they've laid the foundation to really create a consistent message and to build these effective practices and get those in place across the community and the state. And now we know that it's going to take an impact analysis to take it to the next level, all to create a strategic map with communities across the state and at the state level, as well as to build capacity within communities and school districts and states to really analyze programs and services, as well as to better identify programs and services that are aligned with our overall outcome. So with that, I hope you join us. We have an institute coming up with Read On Partners here in October, and happy to answer any questions as we overcome these pitfalls and ensure literacy success for all. Thank you.